One of the most striking photographs from the early days of the Great War shows a group of young volunteers in London in 1914, gathered outside a recruitment office. They smiled at the camera, arms linked together, some still in their work clothes, ready to be issued uniforms. Their faces carried an innocence that soon vanished when they were thrust into the trenches of Belgium and France. Within a year, many of these men would be buried in the mud of the Western Front, their youthful optimism swallowed by the grim reality of industrial warfare. The image stands as a haunting reminder of the gap between patriotic enthusiasm and the brutal truths that awaited them. Another powerful moment was captured at the Battle of Loos in 1915, where a Scottish soldier sat against a crumbled wall, his kilt mudded and his helmet resting loosely on his lap. His expression was neither prideful nor broken, but distant, as if staring past the devastation around him into a future he no longer believed in. Behind him, smoke rose from the ruins of what had once been a village, the outlines of shattered chimneys piercing the horizon. His gaze embodied the exhaustion of a generation that endured unending artillery fire, poisonous gas, and the crushing weight of attrition. The portrait was never intended for public eyes, yet it reveals the soul of countless men whose identities became lost among casualty lists. Another image reveals a French nurse tending to wounded men in a makeshift hospital outside Verdun in 1916. Her uniform is stained, her hands wrapped around a soldier's bandaged head as she leans close to whisper reassurance. The men around her lie silent, their bodies covered in blankets, their boots still caked with trench mud. She looks directly at the camera with calm determination, her eyes reflecting both fatigue and compassion. In a war remembered for its destruction, these women became quiet heroes who patched wounds, offered comfort, and often risked their own lives under shellfire. This moment reminds us that not all warriors carried rifles. Some carried bandages, and their faces deserve to be remembered. A haunting photograph from 1916 shows a group of German prisoners of war being escorted across a barren field by British soldiers. Their uniforms are ragged, their boots worn thin, and their expressions reveal a mixture of fear, relief, and uncertainty. Some look directly into the camera, their eyes tired but alive, while others keep their gaze fixed on the ground. Captured soldiers often faced harsh conditions, long marches, and overcrowded camps. But for many, the photograph itself may have been the last record of their existence. These faces, once enemy combatants, now appear as ordinary men caught in the machinery of a conflict that consumed millions. Another rare image captures a Canadian soldier resting in a trench during the Battle of the Somme. His helmet sits beside him, his rifle leaning against the sandbags, while his eyes remain closed in a brief moment of fragile sleep. Around him, the trench walls are lined with mud and wooden planks, water pooling near his boots. Exhaustion etched itself deeply into every soldier's features, as sleep often came only in stolen moments between barrages. This glimpse into the vulnerability of those who fought shows that beneath the uniform was a young man pushed to his limits, clinging to whatever peace he could find in the chaos. A powerful photograph reveals a group of Senegalese soldiers serving under the French army. They stand shoulder to shoulder in their distinctive uniforms, rifles slung across their backs, their faces solemn and proud. Many had been transported thousands of miles from their homelands in Africa to fight in a European war they had not started. Yet their contribution was immense, their sacrifices largely overlooked in the telling of history. This image restores their presence, giving faces to men whose courage helped shape the outcome of the Great War, but who remained long forgotten in its retelling. One of the most extraordinary moments of the war was captured during the Christmas truce of 1914, when soldiers from both sides stepped out of their trenches and met in no man's land. In the photograph, British and German troops stand together, shaking hands, exchanging cigarettes, and sharing brief laughter in the frozen fields of Flanders. For a single day, the hatred that fueled the conflict gave way to humanity, and the camera preserved the rare sight of enemies as brothers. Their faces remind us that beneath the uniforms and orders were men longing for peace, caught in a war that robbed them of choice. Another haunting image shows Italian soldiers dragging artillery pieces up a steep mountain path in the Dolomites. The incline was so severe that even mules could not be used, forcing the men to rely on ropes and sheer strength. Their breath fogged in the freezing air, their uniforms coated in snow, and their expressions revealed the crushing toll of mountain warfare. Many of these men would perish not from bullets, but from avalanches, frostbite, and exhaustion. The photograph captures a struggle, often overshadowed by the great battles of the Western Front, yet just as brutal in its demand for sacrifice. A deeply human moment was recorded in a small French village near Verdun, where a group of local children stood beside soldiers resting after days of combat. One boy held tightly onto a soldier's hand, looking up with trust and curiosity, while another clutched a loaf of bread given by the troops. The soldiers' faces, tired yet softened by the children's presence, revealed the quiet bonds formed in places ravaged by war. These fleeting encounters gave both soldiers and civilians a reminder of normal life amid chaos. The photograph immortalizes those forgotten connections, where innocence and duty crossed paths in the shadow of devastation. A rare photograph taken in 1917 shows a group of American soldiers newly arrived in France, marching proudly through a village street lined with cheering civilians. Their uniforms were still crisp, their boots polished, and their faces carried the eagerness of men who had not yet faced the horrors of the front. For the weary locals, their arrival symbolized hope that fresh strength might finally tip the balance of the conflict. The image preserves a moment of optimism before the reality of trench life left its mark on these young men. Another striking image captures a line of German stormtroopers preparing for an assault, crouched low in the shadow of a ruined building. Each man carried grenades, rifles, and the determination to break through Allied defenses with new infiltration tactics that relied on speed and surprise. Their eyes, sharp and focused, contrasted with the crumbling stone around them. These men were part of a new generation of soldiers trained for shock warfare, and their presence in photographs revealed the constant evolution of battle strategies in a war defined by stalemate. In a quieter but no less powerful scene, a British chaplain stands among rubble, holding a small service for a handful of soldiers. Helmets rest at the men's feet as they kneel on broken ground, their heads bowed in prayer. The chaplain's hand is raised gently, offering words of comfort against the background of shattered walls and smoldering ruins. For many men, faith, whether strong or fragile, provided a thread of meaning in a world that seemed consumed by destruction. The photograph captures a rare glimpse of spiritual resilience amid physical devastation, a reminder that hope was sought in every form imaginable. In the final year of the war, a photograph shows Allied troops marching into a liberated French town, greeted by crowds who poured into the streets to wave flags and throw flowers. The soldiers' faces reveal both exhaustion and pride, while the civilians beam with relief after years under occupation. Church bells rang in the background, and the camera froze a moment of joy that felt almost unreal after so many years of despair. For both soldier and civilian, it was a glimpse of life returning, even if scars remained everywhere around them. Another unforgettable image reveals a British tank crawling across the battlefield for the first time in 1916. Its iron body pushed through barbed wire and mud, a mechanical giant unlike anything the world had ever seen. Around it, soldiers moved cautiously, uncertain whether this new invention would succeed or break down under fire. The faces of those nearby show awe and disbelief, caught between fear of failure and hope for a weapon that might finally end the stalemate. The tank's debut marked a turning point in modern warfare, and the photograph stands as testimony to the dawn of a new era of mechanized battle. A haunting photograph taken shortly after the armistice on November 11, 1918, captures soldiers embracing each other in relief as news of peace spread across the lines. Some laughed, some wept, and others stood silently, too stunned to believe the fighting was truly over. Their uniforms were torn, their bodies weary, but their expressions reflected a mix of grief and gratitude. For many, survival itself felt like a miracle. This image, filled with raw humanity, reminds us that behind the statistics of victory and loss were countless individuals who carried scars, memories, and a longing for a future free of war.